ultimately enrolls or not. And this one, I'll say why it's important first, which is that until recently, we've always wanted to know more about our patterns of referral, right? We've always wanted to know, like, you know, who's saying yes to home visiting, who's saying no, you know, by characteristic. Are there certain referral sources that tend to yield more enrollments than others? And we've not been able to really look at that, because to be an ECIS, you need to have signed consent for program enrollment, or at least this is how it used to be. You needed to sign, you know, you need to say, yes, I want home visiting. So we had lots of information about people who said yes, but we had really very little information on who said no. And so we've changed that a little. And we have spoken with our lawyers and found out, you know, what we were thinking, is there any way we could just enter anonymous information? Like, you know, literally leave the name blank, or enter anonymous, enter Jane Doe, you know, somehow just no name, just, you know, pregnant, female, age, maybe risk factors, you know, without identifying information. And after discussions with our legal department, we actually found that that was okay. You know, there are ways to enter it that are completely anonymous. And we thought, well, what about those folks who say no to home visiting, but who say, it's okay, you can enter some of my limited demographic information into the system. And so we now have kind of 3 levels of kind of enrollment information. We have the folks who say full bore, yes, I want home visiting. They've signed program consent. All their information is in ECIS. That's the typical, you know, the typical enrollment, enrolled in home visiting. We have the folks who say, I don't want home visiting, but it's okay if you enter some limited demographic information about me in the computer. And we have a separate section in the consent form just for that scenario. So again, it's folks who say, I don't want home visiting, but I say, it's okay, you can put my name and some limited information into the system. So that's on the consent form, and Ashley will show you where to put it when you enter a record. And then we have kind of the third group who say, no thanks to everything. Please don't enter anything about me. And even for that group, there's limited stuff that you can enter that is HIPAA compliant, and that does not compromise privacy in any way. So there's kind of those 3 levels of data entry for those 3 different groups of people, 2 of whom say no thank you to home visiting, and 1 group says yes please to home visiting. And I think that might be my last idea. Yes, so this maybe, well, Ashley probably has ECIS up and ready, but I'll just say what Ashley's going to cover, and then I'll stop sharing my screen, and then Ashley can will show you right in the system. So she'll go through what you see when you log on. She'll go through enrolling a caregiver. She'll go through what's in the caregiver's record, and then the steps to enrolling the child, and then transferring, exiting, re-enrolling, and then finally reports. And I'll just say briefly too that this pretty much follows the this flow pretty much follows what's in the user's manual, which we'll be sharing later today. So, you know, just keep that in mind as questions come up. If you know, when you're back at your office, the user's manual kind of goes through things in this order too. So I will stop sharing and hand it over to Ashley.
Thanks, Connie. Okay. And just for the purpose of it's easier for me to, like, you know, see the screen and not be distracted by my own video, I will be turning off my video, but I can certainly turn it back on when we have questions or anything like that. So do you all see my screen right now? Google up?
Google.
Perfect. Okay, so I will go to ECIS, and I usually save ECIS, so I recommend doing that as a bookmark. So when you first log on, you will have your welcome screen here. This is a statement saying that you are going to, you know, protect confidentiality. You're not going to be sharing this information. You're not going to you know, look up people you shouldn't be looking up, those kind of things. So you just toggle the yes, you agree to that, and then it'll bring you to your landing page here. So you'll notice that on your landing page, you'll tell that you're under your own, it'll tell you what site you're at. So I'm at a OEC home visiting site. I know some folk have subcontractors, so you might have a drop down of other agencies there. And you'll see that you have a number of buckets. So the ones on the left are your enrolled caregivers and children. You land on your pending intakes page, and you can tell that by the black line underneath the box. And then you have 3 buckets where people are either closed or exited. So screened and closed bucket is for those families that maybe they were referred to you, but you lost them to follow up. It turns out they didn't want home visiting. So you would close the referral and they would end up here. Exited caregivers and exited children is self-explanatory. Obviously, they were once enrolled in your program and have since exited or graduated. So we have up in the right-hand corner is where you would add a new referral. And then the actions tab is where you can, remove a home visitor, those kind of things if you're a clinical supervisor. So we're going to go to add a new referral. This is the screening consent that Connie talked about. And basically, if they're enrolling in home visiting, it has to be yes, because this is all information we need to continue with the enrollment form and getting them into the system. If they are not interested in home visiting and they don't want any identifying information in the system, it would be they did not give consent to put screening information in, so it would be a no. And you can see that it's all non-identifiable information. It's just, their gender, whether they were pregnant or not, and then limited risk information. So there's no way to trace this back to anyone. If they still did not want home visiting, but they didn't mind putting some identifiable information in our system, you can say screening consent, yes. And then when you offered home visiting, you could say yes, and did they accept? No. And that's fine. And it'll just save this information. And this is helpful for if, we down the line, we can see that we did come across someone here and maybe we came across them again, those kind of things. Like how often are we touching this family or this caregiver? And it helps us, the risk information helps us like figure out how we can, who are we reaching and how can we, reach them better or offer them more programming, those kind of things. So I'm going to say screening consent, yes, because I'm going to enroll this caregiver that I'm making up. I'm going to say I talked to them on August 2nd. The referral source is how did they, hear about home visiting. The I or we identified this caregiver is the actual home visiting site that is entering it. So in this case, I'm saying I found it, and this could be your outreach staff, former connections, whatever you call them. It could be another home visitor. It could be your clinical supervisor. It doesn't have to necessarily be the person entering it in the computer. It just means someone at this site found them. And then we have a list of other potential referrals. So I'll say we found this caregiver. We found them at the prenatal clinic. I spoke with them in person. And then you would just enter their name. So I'll say Jill Smith, date of birth. We'll do and they are a female. So town of residence, when you enter a town here, it will, bring up the region automatically based on where the caregiver lives at the bottom. When we get down there, for this purposes of time, I'm not going to do anything that's not required, but you can certainly put the phone number, the cell phone number, all that kind of stuff. So this caregiver I'm going to say is prenatal, and their due date will be, we'll do it soon, so that way I can kind of show add a child kind of thing. And this will be their first child. Yeah. I'll say no, it's not the first child, so I can add a sibling, those kind of things. And so risk information, this used to be for rate card. Now it does not have any effect on anything. And so you can certainly put unknown. It doesn't transfer to like the high risk and low risk situation for those who have had rate card in the past does not apply to this version of rate card. So if you truly don't know, you can just say unknown. You don't have to save it for another time to complete. But if you do know, we do want that information. It's helpful to kind of see who we're reaching. So certainly if you do know it, don't just put unknown because it's easier or you don't want to put that stuff in the system. It's nice to have that information. So I'm going to say, yes, we offered home visiting. They accepted. This is if you offer any other additional services. So maybe you connected them with behavioral health services or counseling based on what you know of them, but you can also leave that blank. This is a type in also, so you can certainly say, let's pretend ASQ wasn't there. I could put that there and it will stay. So because Colchester is in Region 3, it automatically defaulted to that. We'll send them to PAT and they're going to come to my site, OEC home visiting. So save to pending intakes means that I've completed this referral. It's going to go to my pending intake page where I can continue the enrollment process. Finish later and save to incomplete intakes is maybe I don't know the town they live in, or I think you might need that because it's required, but maybe I didn't know the risk information. So I can finish this later and it will save to my incomplete intakes and I can, continue working on it later. And cancel would just close this whole thing out. So I'm going to save to pending intakes. This pop-up appears that, saying, are you really sure once you send this, you can't edit the information? And I'm saying yes. So now you'll see that Jill Smith appears on my pending intakes page, which is the landing page for ECIS. And so I will go to assign Jill to a home visitor. We'll assign them to Helen. And there's 3 things that have to happen for the caregiver to move from pending intakes to your enrolled caregivers. First is you have to assign a home visitor. Then you have to complete the enrollment form. And the third would be to add a home visit, the first home visit. And so the enrollment form I'll do right now. And so enrollment form date is the date that Connie, can you correct me if I'm wrong? It's the date that you're entering into the system?
It is. It is. And that we're actually going to remove that because it's been more of a source of confusion than anything. But for now, it was supposed to be, yes, the date that you entered this.
Okay. We'll pretend I'm entering it on the 3rd, the day after we found them. So it doesn't look like I'm holding on to a family for 2 months.
And it's just to be clear, it's not, that's different from the enrollment date, which is why we're going to remove it because it's causing confusion. It's not the enrollment date.
Yes, the enrollment date of a caregiver is the date of their first home visit, which we'll do after this. And so then you would select the language that's spoken at home. It's important to note that you can select more than one here. You can select as many as there are that this caregiver speaks. They identify as female. So you'll see some of this information came over from our enrollment page. Hispanic and Latino ethnicity is part of rate card. So if I select yes and I select that they are Puerto Rican, then this would qualify for a rate card. And if I select no, the Puerto Rican tab does not appear. So we'll say that they are. Marital status. Race is another one where you can select more than one. And then caregiver-child relationship. So how is this caregiver associated with the child? So we said that they're prenatal, so we'll say it's the birth mother. Estimated delivery date is October 3rd. And so we'll put in an address. Main Street. You see the zip code came over because I said Colchester on the referral page. For the sake of time, again, I won't be putting in home phone number, cell phone, or email. Homeless is part of the, not benchmarks, the demographics that we collect for the federal measures. And so you can say yes, no. If I select yes, then it would ask me what their status is. Are they sharing a house? Are they living in emergency or a shelter or some other arrangement? If I select no, this other box enables, and I can say that they rent, own, they live in public housing, whatever the situation is. Educational attainment, and you'll see that although I'm filling this all out up front, it is going to populate a lot of the tabs once this person is enrolled. So we'll say they have their high school diploma, they are not a student, they're working part-time. So for household income, you can select one or the other. If you know the exact amount that they're making, you can certainly put that in here. If you don't know, but you know the poverty level based on some resources we'll share with you tomorrow to kind of gather this information, you can just also put, you know, whatever it is. So one or the other, and we'll just say 40,000 they make. Enrolled in ESL, I'll say no. Source of income, this is another one where you can select more than one. So you can say they, you know, they have paychecks from their job, they collected an alimony or child support. And for governmental assistance, this is another one where you can also select more than one. Okay. Health and wellness, this is, do they have a usual source of medical care? Usual source of dental care, health insurance type. If they're pregnant, I said yes, they were. Tobacco use at enrollment. I'm going to say yes, just so I can show you how to add a referral later, which is part of the benchmarks. And so you'll see that risk populated already based on what I said on the enrollment form. So they were low risk for this system. Priority populations. This includes all members of the household. So it's not just specifically about the caregiver. It is about anyone that is in the household with the caregiver and the child if they're born already. So is there a history of child abuse in the house? Is there a history of substance abuse in the house? Tobacco in the household? I'll say yes, just because I said that this person was smoking. Low student achievement, developmental delays or disabilities, and formerly in the military or currently serving. Household, number of children in the household, not including the index. So I think they had a sibling, I believe, from the referral form, and number of adults in the household, not including the caregiver. So I'll say one other one. This is for your records or for you to note. This person will be seeing weekly. And did I get program consent? Yes. And I believe Connie mentioned this in the beginning. Verbal consent is okay. We just ask that when you do first see the family at the first home visit in person, that you get them to sign the consent form. So this was back in August, I think. So I'll say I got consent the same day I'm filling this out. And then you'd hit submit. Oh no, a technical error. Hopefully it's gonna continue on. This is a fake home visiting site, as you can see. So we've had issues on here. It shouldn't be the same issues in real sites. Well, the good thing is that if this doesn't move forward, I do have someone in pending intakes or already enrolled that I can show you.
Yeah, Ashley, I'm not sure why I did that, but I am glad you have that person in pending.
Well, maybe I'll go to someone already enrolled, Connie, just so, because that means I'd have to fill out the form again or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Or pending, because this, so when you hit submit here, normally this would go into the pending intakes. And you've got, yeah, you could just pick up.
Yeah, it didn't save anything.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so after that, when it, you know, is working, like I said, this is a mock site, so that we've had issues with this mock site. And so once you complete the enrollment form, the next thing you would do would be add a home visit. And then you would, this is the first home visit that you have. Like we said, that for a caregiver, their enrollment date is the date of the first home visit. So I would backdate this, let's say, to when I met them in August. So you would, it auto figures out that I was there for 50 minutes. If you have other people enrolled, right now I wouldn't because this is the first home visit, but you could, the drop down would pre-populate every enrolled caregiver or other child sibling that was there. And so you could do that. Developmental delays would not appear for this person right now because there's no child connected to them and they are prenatal. And so that wouldn't appear until a child is born. The visit took place in the home, but there are a list of other areas where the visit can take place. And as you see, we added a lot of these for COVID, such as a video full visit following model fidelity, a phone full visit following model fidelity. And then we also have the option to say you did less than a home visit, but we want to count that communication, especially during this time. So notes, this is not, just to note, this is not a system where you would put case notes. This is just a system where we don't want case notes at all. That's what you have your model fidelity system for, such as Penelope or Visit Tracker. This is just for maybe if the supervisor's, you know, sending this to someone, you can say they have a dog or the dog jumps, be careful, those kind of things. Nothing important really should go in these notes. So then if this person, the enrollment form did not give me that issue, this person would no longer be here. Jill Smith would actually be an enrolled caregivers and I would have someone else. So this 8 would really be a 9. So for the sake of time, let's pretend Jill went over here and Jill is now going to be Bella Brown. We'll do Bella Brown just because they don't have a child added yet. So you'll notice that once you go through these tabs, the information has come over from your enrollment form. So remember on the enrollment form, we put in their usual source of medical care, their dental care, the household information, whether they, you know, was there child abuse in the house, is there low student achievement? So all this information pre-populates across these tabs over here. The first tab is the summary page, and this is helpful just to see, you know, who's the home visitor assigned, how frequently are we seeing them? So we're seeing them weekly. This is where you would see any siblings enrolled. This is also where you would see the other caregiver enrolled, although you couldn't go, if you were a home visitor, you couldn't go to that caregivers tab. You would just see that, oh, dad or the mom is enrolled. This is where the index child will be added once we get there. And once you add a child, you'd select if they're either primary caregiver or not. Also on the summary page is where you add visits. So we added the first home visit of this person right here. You'll see a record of it was 1-1. And so we can always add another, and the same way I did it before. Just kind of go through this. No child's there, visit location, public place, and we'll save that. And you can see that this visit also saved right here. Okay, and so under the actions tab is where you would, and we'll come back to this. I just want to show you what else is on the summary page. This is where you can add a child. This is where how you would transfer the caregiver to another agency if they moved. If you did the Kemp, which we don't require, you would see it here and you could fill it out here and save it. But we don't require that, but we left it in there for those that do like to do that. This is how you would exit the caregiver, change the index child, or change caregiver dates. I'm not sure if you can do that or if that's just my, if I can see that because I have a different permission level. Okay, so from the summary page, we'll go to the referral next. And again, this is just the referral information that you entered at the start. You can't change anything on it, but it's nice to see how they came in. And so I believe when Connie, correct me if I'm wrong, when someone is transferred, you can also see what they came in as, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So if someone, like you can see where a home visit or a caregiver originated, for example, I was a new site. So the next tab is demographics. Like I said, all of this transfers over. You can always update it though. You can override it. So maybe they moved. Where's their address right here? If they moved, you can just, you know, change it. It will save. So it's always editable. And yeah, that is demographics. And I just want to go back to demographics quick because some of you guys have caregivers that were enrolled prior to July 1 before this new rate card. And so this is where you would, change the ethnicity if you want to. I mean, the rate card is only on newly enrolled caregivers, but if you want to just have, now that we added this feature, update previous caregivers, you certainly can go ahead and do that on this page. Okay, so the next tab is education and income, and I'm going to bring your attention to here because this is part of rate card. We have the education and employment metric, and so based on rate card, you would update this tab. You would either, if they came in without a degree, you could change that they have a degree, put the date verified within the quarter. So we'll say the 7th I verified this. This is where you could say whether they're back to school. Name of the program would be needed. You graduate you can leave the graduation date if they haven't graduated yet, but you would verify here with time in the quarter. Then employment is another part of the rate card, and so make sure if they are employed part-time to qualify for rate card, it has to be at least 20 hours a week. The verification that they were employed has to be within the quarter. The name of the employer could be very vague. It could just be restaurant, wait staff.
Hey, Ashley, can I jump in for a sec? We had a question in the chat saying this information would only have to be done once, right? And if the child was born, I would have to enroll the mom and child separately, question. And I want to just clarify. So the enrollment information, like that enrollment form that Ashley filled out, that you only fill out once. Where she is now, like now the record's established. So now she's sort of going through and updating the information. So does that make sense? And I apologize, it's D Waters. I don't know who what the first name is. But so the enrollment information that gets entered once. You're absolutely right. But now, Ashley, the nice thing is Ashley can go, like, say the education changed, like say the status right now is student or trainee. If that changed, like someone graduated, she would change that to not a student or trainee, and she would change it, put in a graduation date. So the idea is the information is continuously updated. I would say some information is every single home visit, other information is quarterly. We'll get their entire schedules around when information is due. But the idea is the enrollment information is a one-time deal. And then the enrollment information gets put into these categories, and these categories where Ashley is now get updated constantly. Does that, I don't know if D Waters wants to chime in. I hope you could do it either verbally or in the chat, but I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, so that is the education and income tab. And like I said, rate card, so the verification date updated would have to fall within the quarter for that to, trigger that it was achieved. Okay, so now the health and wellness tab. And so you'll see that this came over from the enrollment form, the usual source of medical care, dental care. These should be, updated quarterly is what we ask for demographic information. So I'll say that my visit on the 8th, I updated all this information with them. Medicaid, health insurance was updated. And so when we go over benchmarks tomorrow, health insurance is a benchmark. And so you would, have to have 2 updates in a 6-period time. And I don't want to, go too far into benchmarks, but it's like, did the caregiver have continuous health insurance for the past 6 months? So the system would be looking for 2 dates in 6 months. So if you are updating this quarterly, like we, suggest and encourage and want, that would be fine. You'd already have it. If you update it at the end of every quarter, whatever, you'd already should be achieving that measure if they did have health insurance. Prenatal care at enrollment, you can all fill this information out. And so I said that, or this caregiver was pregnant at enrollment. And so this is a new feature, the pregnancy and postpartum information. A lot of this will auto fill in once we add the child. And so the only thing that you really would have to add would be the prenatal care, which is a benchmark. They have to have 3 prenatal visits. So you would simply add that here, and it would just, you know, what was the date? And I don't remember what this caregiver was. So it will automatically calculate the trimester, and then you can add another one. Okay. And so then you can close that out, and that will be there. I can always view it, and they will still be there. The other thing that you have to add manually within this box is the postpartum appointment, which is also part of the rate card. And so this box is going to be edited, right, Connie? Or oh yes, you add it here.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So postpartum appointment, and this would be, you know, after the child is born and after you've added the child, you would fill in postpartum appointment, you know, just exactly what Ashley did, those 2 fields.
Yep. And so once the child's born, their name would come over based on when you enroll them, the date of birth, their birth outcome. It would calculate, take their estimated due date and their birth date and figure out if it was full term and their gestational age. And then you would select index when you enroll them too. So it would, you know, let you know if this is the index child or whatnot. If mother becomes pregnancy again, mother or father, because we're counting dads in the rate card too, you would add a pregnancy, add the estimated due date, and there would be another row for that pregnancy. Any questions before I move on from there, or anything did I miss, Connie?
Yes, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so that's a good question because hypothetically, let's say this is Twanda, sorry. We have a mom, child is 3 years old, she's pregnant. So the question was, do we keep the 3-year-old as the index? Do we add the pregnant child, like does the pregnant child, you know, the child that mom has in utero now become the index child? I think that's kind of what me and my team was talking about yesterday and needing clarity on.
I think that is up to your program and your model. Like if you think that we want you to enroll the new pregnancy, yes, like because it'll count, like what Connie had mentioned, it's part of the preterm birth measure. It will count towards rate card if it's, you know, meets all the requirements. Making it the index child, I think, is up to you and your model. Does the family need more services? Does it make sense to, you know, continue working with this family with another child, or should you just continue with the 3-year-old in that case? So I think it depends on what the family's needs are and where they are in their service or care.
So if I enroll the child that's in utero, the data's collecting what? Both children or just the index still?
You would have to change them from index. A lot of the measures are on the index child only. So.
Okay.
But I would look back to, like, what does the family need? Does it make sense to continue with this family, or should you find a family that needs more services that, you know, can take, if the family doesn't need you anymore, you can enroll another family?
No, it's not so much about the family needing us. This is about capturing the data that you're looking for and having clarity regarding, you know, do we still, and so according to you, we still enroll in new pregnancy regardless.
Yes.
The question you're saying is we determine if the 3-year-old stays index or the baby. Is that correct?
Correct. You can add the new pregnancy and they could be a sibling.
Got it. But that's totally up to the site to determine.
And the situation of the family. Like, do they really need you for another 3 years, or are they close to their goals? And does it make sense to continue with the 3-year-old and graduate the family?
Yeah, most of our families love us to stay on board, so that may answer that question. Okay, thank you.
Excuse
Lisa?
me. Sorry, I'm picking somebody up at the same time, but it used to be against policy from OEC for McVie programs to keep families for a subsequent child. That was against the policy.
Yeah.
So that's a new change then.
It's newer. We reverted back to what your model requires or what your model allows. When we added, when we moved to the OEC, added additional models, that was a NFN kind of thing. And so now we revert back to what your evidence-based model allows. If they allow you to add the second child, fine.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, but I hear your point, and I think the thing is really well taken. Like, it's true, our families would stay with us forever. I mean, we've had families that have said, listen, I'll have another baby if that's what it takes for us to stay. And we're like, oh, no.
Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't make sense for them to stay, or is there other families that need you, kind of thing.
Right. And that's the thing, you want to make your service as wide as possible. So, okay, thanks.
Thanks. Gwen?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. One question: when it comes to a parent and she has twins, and I'm adding them into ECIS, I know the caregiver, the mom, and say the first ba, but once you add in the mother and the child, and you want to add in the second baby, do you just go back to add? And because once you see once you see the dashboard, and does it show both childs with that one mom?
Yep. So it would have both children if they're, I can go back to the summary page here. If there were 2 index children, it'd have them both under index child. And you would add the second child the same way you would add the first. So you'd go to, like, when we get to there, you'd add the child, search for them, make sure they're not already in the system, those kind of things.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So, Ashley, we have a few questions in the chat that are probably better said than written out loud. So the first one is from Laura. Do we enter info on prenatal postpartum care for previously enrolled mothers? So what she's saying is, what if, this, I'm going to paraphrase Laura, I think this is your point, which is, this new table is great going forward, but what about all those, pregnancies we've had in the past? And the answer to that is sort of twofold. That's why I wanted to not try to put all this in the chat, which is it should fill in. If there was just one pregnancy, it should fill in automatically. So if you had a mom who you got prenatally and gave birth in, say, 2020, right? It should fill in automatically that table. That filling in automatically meaning the date of birth, the child's name, whether they're indexed, EDD, full term birth, and so on, the information it can derive from the record. That's not, unfortunately, that we were really hoping this feature would be ready by today. The developers are kind of struggling to make that happen, but it really should be working that way within the next week or two. But the second part, which is a little more nuanced, one of the reasons we added that pregnancy and postpartum table is that for folks who knew the system as it used to be, that there was only one field for pregnant, yes, no, and EDD. So if you had a second child, it was getting confusing. Well, is this the EDD of the first child or the second child? There's only one EDD in the system. So we needed a way to keep track of subsequent pregnancies. And I'm saying that because that the system won't have, right? Because there was only ever one EDD. And if it's for the second child, you might have to go in and fill that in as a user. So this is, I know this is it's kind of a nuanced, it's kind of a lot to take in. If you don't, I think if you know the system, what I just said makes sense to you. If you don't know the system, you're probably saying, I have no idea what she's talking about. But I'll sort of paraphrase by saying, if you only have one child in the mom's history, the table should fill in automatically. And that'll happen, as I said, in the next week or two, that should be working. If you had 2 pregnancies with a mom, some of the information might have to be filled in by the user, and we'll be looking at your records, we being myself as well as the program liaisons, and I think we can probably handle those on a case-by-case basis. So let's kind of cross that bridge when we get to it, but that's kind of the fuller answer to Laura's question. So I'm just going to pause. There are a couple more questions in the chat, Ash, but I'm just going to pause and see if there's any reaction to what I just said. Okay, well, folks are mulling. I know we don't have much time, so I'm going to jump to 2 more questions in the chat. The next is the site coordinators, screeners only enter declines, ? And this is from Anita. So I don't totally understand the question. I'll read it again for Ashley. It says the site coordinator screeners only enter declines, and I think that means people who declined home visiting. Anita, I don't know if you want to chime in. I guess I'm confused because the screeners would enter both people who declined and who accepted. I don't know if that answers the question.
So no, just currently we're entering all the families who decline, and then the person receiving the referral, the supervisors enter the enrollment information. So I just want to clarify.
I think that's what your site has been doing, but certainly other sites have the screeners entering and sending referrals in the system. They also enter the declined folk as well, but certainly a screener could, in your example, since you're at Yale, if you found a caregiver and you were going to send them to City of New Haven, you can certainly put that in the system and then send them to City of New Haven, and they'll appear on their pending intakes page. But I think you guys have not moved that way. You guys are still, calling up the clinical supervisor and sending the information, correct?
So yeah, what would be best practice? How do you want us to do this? I just want to make sure that we're doing it the right way.
Hi, this is Kat, the supervisor for that site. I mean, I'm just going to chime in. I think it's probably more of a agency decision as far as how our workflow goes. But I'm interested to see what you think, Ashley, because we have a totally different system probably compared to other sites and regions.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally to put it all in the system and send it rather than faxing or calling up and emailing. That's my personal preference. I'm not sure if OEC has a stance, and if we do, we can modify the policy manual if we have a specific way we want it done. That's just how I think. I don't know if Connie or anyone else has suggestions.
No, I don't. I think I completely agree, Ash.
Okay.
So there's still a few more questions in the chat. Sue says the estimated graduation date will not let me go further than today's date. And I actually love that question because it's not an estimated graduation date. What it's meant to be the actual, and this is under education and income. Ash, if you want to just maybe go to that tab. Yep. It's not estimated graduation, it's true graduation. And we changed that. We were running into trouble because people were putting, EDOC, expected date of completion, estimated graduation date. But it's really, for rate card purposes and benchmark purposes, we're not interested if a student is going to maybe hopefully graduate next May. What we want to know is, did they actually graduate in May? And that's why you can't put a future date in. It's really only meant to document actual graduations. So that's the answer to that. And I'm actually very glad you asked that. Laura Cotto says, do we enter all prenatal appointments or just until rate card outcome is achieved? That is a good question. I think
that's in the FAQs that says you just need the rate card ones, correct?
Yeah, that's right. The rate card requirements are that you need 3. The only hedging I have on that is we would like to know more. So we might get back to you with further information on that, but Ashley's absolutely right. I would say the minimum is 3, and that is what sort of qualifies for rate card. And then Dewater was also saying, so you can't have more than 1 index in regards to children, and that's not true. I'm not sure when you typed this if we clarified that twins is an example where you could have 2 index children in the same family. Ashley was describing a situation where you have an older child and then a younger one comes along. So usually you only have 1 index child at a time, and the index child is considered kind of like the focus of services, the primary recipient of services. So traditionally we do only have 1 index child, but twins is a good example of where you could have 2 index children. I would say it's kind of unusual, but it's definitely possible in the system. It's not like the system, will disallow that. The system does allow you to have 2 index children. Okay, and Twanda just about, Twanda also responded, I prefer contacting me so that I can determine if it's a good fit. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good practice that the referring site call the site they intend to send it to make sure A, they have room or vacancy, B, that the family is eligible for that model, C, that it's the appropriate service for that family. So before something is just sent and appeared on the pending intakes of the news site, then there should be that phone call just saying, I'm sending this your way. Does it make sense?
Yeah, and I would underscore that, we enabled that in the system that, someone could intake, enter the referral information and send it anywhere, throughout the state. You could be sitting in Torrington and send your caregiver could say, I'm moving to Hartford. You could send it to Hartford. But the idea by enabling that, the idea was that there would be communication before that send was hit, that you would call that person in Hartford first and say, I know this is a little different from Twanda's situation, but you would call the receiving supervisor first and say, hey, I've got this caregiver. Do you have, just as Ashley was saying, do you have the capacity to take them? Is it a good fit? Shall I go ahead and forward this referral? And we have gotten into situations where people are kind of sending referrals to agencies who weren't necessarily prepared or for them or didn't necessarily know they were coming. So so please do contact the receiving agency before you send a referral their way.
Okay.
And that we are caught up, Ashley.
Great. I'm just clicking around the system because if you don't do stuff, it times you out. So I'm just, adding dates, checking boxes. Okay. So now we're still on the health and wellness tab, and we just did the pregnancy and postpartum information box. You'll also see here that breastfeeding measure is here, and this is where you would, if the child was born, you would indicate if they were breastfeeding at birth, yes, no, and depending on what you select, different boxes enable. So I selected yes, they were breastfeeding at birth, which means that the breastfeeding at 6 months measure would appear, which is the benchmark. And so if I said no, if they're not breastfeeding at birth, then that measure would not appear because they cannot breastfeed at 6 months if they weren't at birth. If I select no, or if I select, don't select anything here, X out, you can see that breastfeeding not indicated enables, and I could say yes, it wasn't indicated, and the reasons why, such as illicit drug use or treatment, infant has a health condition where breastfeeding is not, they can't breastfeed, history of sexual abuse, taking medication. So there's a number of reasons why breastfeeding was not indicated, and so forth. But for this, I'll just say yes, and then the date entered, you would put the date you verified or found out the information. Next is the tobacco use and referral. And so this caregiver was using tobacco at enrollment. And so you'll notice that on your benchmarks, tobacco referrals is a measure or is a benchmark. And so you would edit this information. Did they refer for cessation services? And so to count for the measure, it's as simple as, they don't have to quit. They don't have to seek out the services. It's did you give a referral? So you can say that the caregiver was not interested, but I shared referral anyways, and they would have satisfied the benchmark. And sharing a referral is just given the quit line number, information about quitting, how to quit. And so you would just, add that referral here. And it would populate here. We also have here the tobacco outcome because people wanted to capture, like maybe they didn't quit, but they substantially reduced the amount of tobacco they used since enrollment based on what we have been talking to them about. So that's awesome. And we have this opportunity right here where you can indicate that or when they did quit. You can say that they did quit and the date of the outcome, those kind of things. Okay. And so is there something? Okay. So I think we're good here. I don't know why submit's not enabled. Am I missing something? But I don't think so. Maybe I didn't change.
The caregiver, the date of outcome there.
Yeah. Okay, so there we go.
And Ash, as long as I'm interrupting you, we have a couple more questions in the chat. When sharing a family with another HV, are both required to put in documentation such as well child visits.
So, yeah, mom and dad are enrolled.
Yeah, I think that's the spirit. So Sue will, this is from Sue. We'll answer it quickly. I thought it was 1 home visitor per family. It's 1 home visitor per caregiver. And it's not super common, but we do have instances where there are 2 home visitors per family, and that only happens if there's a traditional home visitor working with a mom and a fathering home visitor working with a dad. So the responsibilities parse out that way. Like each home visitor gets their own caregiver, but you're absolutely right. They do sort of share responsibility for documentation about the child. So the traditional home visitor and the fathering home visitor would kind of work out amongst themselves, you know, who's going to enter that ASQ. They both can see information about the child. And Sue followed up by saying, I thought we were moving away from traditional home visitors. Ashley, you might be a better one to answer that than me. Again, the question is, I thought we were moving away from traditional home visitors.
I don't know. We love our fathering home visitors and we love serving fathers. Of course, a traditional home visitor can serve a father and vice versa. But that's how we just distinct between the 2, like, you know, roles of a home visitor. But they can certainly see the other gender or whatnot. And going back to Thais's question about 1 home visitor per family, that goes back to what your model requires. So I think you're talking about PAT last year. We had this whole thing about how they see it as a family program and only 1 home visitor should be serving a family. And that's the case for PAT, but we've always said in ECIS, we want to see documentation of what both home visitors are doing for PAT purposes. And I know some people on here are not PAT, so refer to your own model. It would be, what does your model require? I would select the 1 home visitor who's seeing, you know, the primary caregiver or whatever your situation is, who's ever having more consistent visits, whatever that situation is, and put that into your database system. So I'm not going to speak to what the models require for OEC and ECIS. We do want to see every caregiver that is enrolled, and that could be with a male home visitor, a female home visitor, whatever the case is, mom, dad, 2 moms, whatever the case is, we want to see that in ECIS system.
And then, so I'll let folks mull on that. You can chime in if you want, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the next one, which is back to the issue at Yale. And I think the bottom line here is we should probably talk offline about the referral flow at Yale, as Kat was saying, because Maureen had asked, can an agency, if a referral gets sent to an agency, can the agency reroute it, you know, send it out again? So if it's sent to, you know, an agency who has a subcontractor, can it kind of forward that referral onto the subcontractor? And the answer is no. ECIS was set up to directly send the referral. You know, someone enters that referral information, you get 1 shot to send it. And the idea was you're going to send it to whoever's going to serve that family. And that's one reason where, you know, we say pretty strongly, like, please make sure that supervisor knows it's coming and can take it. And, you know, there's no issues, because we're going to have to get a developer involved, you know, if that supervisor isn't prepared to serve that family. And Maureen is correctly saying, yes, but then it's not going to work to send the referrals to the partnership because they can't sort of reroute it and parse it out. So so I think rather than take up more time here, I think I just want to make 2 points, which is that ability to reroute a referral is not in the system. So please be aware of that. And then in the case of, and maybe if we have to change it, we will, but honestly, it's not going to happen overnight. So so please be aware of that, is what I'm trying to say. And secondly, let's talk to Yale about offline about how we can work with that. Next one is, would I need to get a consent form to talk to the other home visitor about dad or family system? That's an interesting question. Would I need to get a consent form to talk to the other home visitor about dad or family system? You know, let's, Ashley, I don't know if you want to comment. I would say let us think about that for a bit and add that to the list of things to get back to folks on, unless Ashley, you have a response.
No, I would say let's think about that. You know, yeah.
Okay. And then okay, so we are caught up, Ashley. Thank you.
Okay. So I've finished everything on the health and wellness tab. So now I would go to screening and referral. And this tab under the caregiver is where you would enter depression screenings or IPV screenings. And so you could see here, I could toggle between the two, depression, IPV. I would add a depression screen here. And I don't know the dates of this, so we'll just throw some things in. Receiving depression services at enrollment. You could say yes, but you screened anyways. And I'm going to say they do have depression, just so I don't know what the score is, but so I can show you how to add a referral. So referred for services, yes. Date referred. The second was service contact made, and the date that they actually had the appointment, and it was verified at the home visit I went to. And you can see it populates everything here. And so we'll get into benchmarks tomorrow, but depression screening is one of the ones that requires a follow-up if there's risk. And so I did a screening, there was risk indicated. The system's going to be looking to see if I made a referral and what the outcome of that referral was. Same thing for IPV. You can add the IPV right here, the date you did the screening, the instrument you used, was risk indicated. I'll put yes, just so I can show you how to refer. I referred for services, and the date that I referred was the same date that I screened, we'll say. Okay, and that pre-populates right there. This is where you could verify that you did not do a screen. Check to indicate that a depression screen was not done. And then you can say you're reporting no screen. And it'll do that right there. Okay, I'm going to hit submit so it saves, even though I think it did. Next tab is household. And so this auto populates from a lot of the things we put on the enrollment screen. They had the number of children, not including the index, the number of caregivers in the household, including the caregiver. So I'll say 2, the date that we verified this information, weekly visits, planned, when was this verified, you can update it. And then again, the priority populations of the families here. This is where you can add other household members. So these caregivers will not be enrolled. This is if just like say grandma or the aunt or the mother of the caregiver is at the house attending some visits. This means you're not doing full enrollments on them. So you can always add someone in. Frank Monday, relationship to child, we'll say it is the grandfather, and submit. So this is where you'd add those other caregivers that are not enrolled, okay? And options include editing them or deleting them. And then just to finish up the caregiver page, consent, it keeps when you had consent from this caregiver, the status history. So this will include if this caregiver was ever transferred, it'll have that information in here, the dates that happened, if they ever exited and were they re-enrolled. It'll have the history of what pretty much the history of where this caregiver is experiencing in-home visiting. Okay, and then go back, we'll bring you back to your pending intakes. Anything on the caregiver before I add a child? No? Okay. One thing before I add a child, I just want to show a feature that we have when you add a referral that I totally skipped over. And it's the system looking to see if a caregiver already exists. So I'm not going to go through with this referral. I'm just going to quickly show that the system automatically searches to see if someone by that caregiver or that name is already enrolled. So I'm just going to show you someone that we know is enrolled. And the name and the date of birth has to be exact for this to work. So if you put in like, I think they were born around the 28th, or I'll put the 27th of September or whatever. Oops, what did I do here? So I have the exact birth date of this child, this caregiver, and the name, and it's the system's already searching for them and says that there's a record for Annabelle Tuesday exists in home visiting. Select from the options below. So I know that Test Health Center is in Bridgeport area. So if I'm in Colchester at OEC home visiting program and the same caregiver with this, and a caregiver with the same name and birth date is enrolling, but they're currently enrolled in Bridgeport, and I know that this person hasn't recently moved, I can say this is a different caregiver. I'm going to continue with the referral because I don't think someone in Bridgeport's also enrolling in a home visiting program in Colchester. However, if I was in Bridgeport, let's say Child and Family Guidance Center, and I know Test Health Center is in Bridgeport, I can say, this person might be the same caregiver that's already receiving services. So let me contact Test Health Center. Let me talk to this family and see if someone's already coming to visit them at their home. And you would select this one. And then if you select that, it would discontinue the referral and bring you back to the pending intakes page. Another way that the system checks, and I'll add a different caregiver's name, is to see if they've already ever been enrolled. And so I will do Joe Smith. Birth date 4/22/1991. And so it will say, you have a different button here that says this is the same caregiver re-enroll. So Joe Smith, what has exited, so we can see that they were once at this Bridgeport Health Center. And they were enrolled until, earlier this month. And so maybe they moved, or maybe I'm in Bridgeport and I'm come across them again and they still want services. The system saying, we found someone with this name and birth date. Yes, re-enroll them. No, this is a different caregiver. Continue with the referral or cancel altogether. So that's a newer feature. We used to have a search button that we didn't think was being utilized as often as it should. So we kind of had the system do it automatically. Okay, so now I'll go back to my caregiver and add a child. So I was in Bella Brown. So to add a child to a caregiver, you're going to go to their summary page and then go over to actions. You're going to select add a child. And it's going to come up with this pop-up. This caregiver has a pregnancy already entered into the record. Is this the same child? And I'm going to say yes, just so it can, eventually will pre-populate that pregnancy bucket. And I'm going to search for their child's name. So this is Brown. Child's birth date, we'll say it was last week, and we're going to press search. You'll notice here that it says this child will be linked to the current pregnancy for this caregiver. If you made a mistake and it's not the same pregnancy that's in the thing, and you're adding, a sibling or a different child, you can say don't link them. But we're going to pretend that it's the same pregnancy I added before. The child is now born. So it's searching to see if this child is already enrolled anywhere or in a system. Any questions while we wait, Connie?
There are some in the chat, but I think we're caught up. Feel free to speak up, anyone, if I've missed your comment or question. Oh, SACID, there's a SACID question I missed. Is SACID populated? Yes. Okay, I'll take this quickly verbally. Is the SACID populated once the caregiver is enrolled? And does it change if the family's checked? So let me just give you a 30-second explanation of what the SACID is. The SACID stands for student, I'm not going to know off the top of my head. It's in the manual.
Student ID.
State assigned, thank you. State assigned student ID number. So SACID is associated with the child, not the caregiver. And so when Ashley does this search, the system is going to assign, if either the child has a SACID or not. If they're a newborn, kind of by definition, they're not going to have one. So the system's going to assign it, and it will be assigned to the child, and it will stay with that child really forever. When they go to elementary school, it will be their ID. So I hope that yes, it does it automatically. It does not change. The question was, does it change if the family's transferred? No, it sticks with the child.
Okay. So you'll see here that no results came up for Minnie Brown, born on that date. So I'm going to say if there was someone, it would have the list of children that all have the same name and birth date. And I'm going to say, so none of these children, because there is no children, match the child I'm trying to enter. So I'm going to add a new child. And this is the child enrollment form. So it automatically brought over the name. Again, race, you can select more than one. Same with, you would select the same ethnicity, the gender. SACID will be filled out once the child's enrolled. So it brought over the birth date, the estimated due date from my pregnancy chart that I added, and it calculated the gestation or weeks. And so I'm going to say that this child was not premature. They were born in Charlotte Hungerford, normal weight, child order. I'll say it was the first, like known DCF involvement, no. Who can child? The parent can sign consent for this child. So this is the child's health information. We're going to say that they have insurance, you know, all the same kind of information as the caregiver that we entered. The enrollment form date in this case, again, does not matter, correct, Connie? Because it's going to be based on the child's birth date is their enrollment date.
Well, so, correct if they're prenatal.
Yes, this child was prenatal.
Yeah, yeah.
If they were not prenatal, the enrollment form date would be their enrollment date, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
And that is also in the works to change. We're changing. I believe that's going to read enrollment date, like period, no form in it.
Yeah. What am I missing that it won't let me move forward? Oh, there we go. It was just slow. Okay, so after I do the enrollment form, I'm going to have to join the family. And so does this caregiver, does this child reside with the caregiver? And we have the definition that residing is defined as spending at least 4 nights per week with the caregiver. So I'll say yes. Is this caregiver the primary? Yes. Remember, every child should have a primary caregiver attached to them. And you can change it as much as you need. We'll say that this is the index child and they're going to have 1 household. So now we'll see here, this is Bella Brown, the caregiver, and we'll see that the index child is Minnie right here. So we'll go to Minnie's file that I just added. Oh, and I want to go back to Bella Brown just to show you that you can see remember I added that additional caregiver. So Frank Monday is here. So we'll go to the child's. And then so their child's record is very similar to the caregiver's record. You have the summary page where it can give you the information of how often you're seeing this family, any siblings attached, who the primary caregiver is assigned, are there other enrolled caregivers, those kind of things. Then you have the demographics page. This pre-populates with the information you filled out on the child enrollment form. So you'll see here, but it is able to be updated. So if you made a mistake, you can certainly say, I made a mistake and I can update it here. Health and wellness tab also pre-populates with information you filled out in the enrollment form. But again, you should update these quarterly as their demographics. So each quarter they should be updated to verify that it's still true. Safe sleep, which is a benchmark measure, is under health and wellness. And so you add safe sleep, you would say you're going to add a parent report. Remember, this is all based on parent report, and it's not like we're going into the child's bedroom and verifying that they're being put to sleep safely. It's based on parent report. So the child is being put to sleep on its back. There is no bed sharing and there is no soft bedding. Okay. And so the date that you discussed this with the parent. And then it would add right there. Okay. Well, child visits. So this is part of rate card, because if you have that 4th measure where you're getting the prenatal visits, they were enrolled on time, AKA before 32 weeks, I believe it is. And then did the mother get the postpartum appointment, and did the child get a well child visit within 8 weeks of enrollment? And so this is where you would add that information. And so you'll notice that there's a visit window because this is based on the AAP schedule, that the 3 to 5 day visit has to happen between September 20th and September 24th. All these windows are based on the child's birth date, so they're auto-populated. And then you can add a well child visit by hitting edit. Did it take place? Yes. The date the visit took place, and it has to happen the 20th, so we'll say the 20th, and the date you verified it. Let's say I had a home visit on the 20th. Any notes, again, don't put case notes in here. This is just notes that maybe you want your supervisor to see, although they would have to open the window to see the note, or no, it would appear here. So any, non-identifying private information can go here. And so you'll see down here, the well child visit is completed. So as you enter them, they move down to this row down here. Okay, so that is health and wellness. I will move into early language and literacy. And so these are some more benchmarks on this page. You'll notice that parent-child interaction is here. So this is for those programs who use the home, the dance, the piccolo, whatever tool you're using, the cheers, it would go here. You can see the drop down. So the date, it auto defaults to the current date, but you can always backdate it if you wanted to. Let's say I did this on the 8th. I mean, obviously this child's not eligible for probably a lot of them, and it wasn't even born by the 8th, but I'm just doing this for example purposes. And so you can select the tool you did, and you can hit add the observation. And you can keep adding more, okay, as you do them once a year. Read, sing is a benchmark measure, and this should be updated quarterly. Do not update it every home visit because it will clog the system and cause issues. So it only needs to be updated quarterly. And it's does the caregiver read to, sing to, or tell stories to the child every day? And so you would say, whatever the situation is, and then add the record. Again, it auto defaults to the current date, but you can backdate. ASQs. So you'll see here that you have ASQ regular and then ASQ SE. So you can toggle between the two. It only shows 3 at a time, but if you want to see more, you can say 12. Obviously, we don't have those records in here, but if we had 12 records, it would, show them all there. The date range, again, is based on the child's birth date. So the 2-month in this case is due between October 17th and December 17th. You would do the ASQ. There would be you would click on the ASQ you're doing, the date you're doing it. I'm doing it early, clearly. So it was completed, and it was completed by the parent and the home visitor together. If you did it through the Sparkler app, you can click this and you would just say, the parent and child did it together with the Sparkler app. You don't need the scores, although we do want them if you know them. Put them in here. Was there parent concern? I'll put yes, just so I can show you how you do a referral. And delay was indicated, yes. Okay. And so that little box just tells you they might be eligible for birth to 3. You should consider referring them. So I'm going to press save just so I can show you how a referral appears. You'll notice that there's a little plus sign right here. So that is how you would add a referral. Okay. You'd have to click on that plus sign, a little drop down would appear, and you would say add a referral. Now, maybe this is a case where the parents doesn't want a birth to 3 referral yet. You want to monitor the situation, rescreen as needed. So you can always say individual support from a home visitor. That counts as a referral for the benchmarks. And so you would do the date that the referral happened. Did they receive services? Yes. And then the date that they received services. It could be your next home visit, whatever the case is, and you would say saved. Okay, so that's how you add referral information. I want to stop and see if there's any questions from the field, Connie.
There are a few, but I'm responding by, in the chat, so I think we're good. Thanks.
Okay. Okay. So that is early language and literacy. The next tab is injuries and maltreatment. And so this is where you would enter any injury the child had, any maltreatment suspected or that was reported, those kind of things. You would do that by clicking the report injury or report maltreatment. And so when you hit that, it would say the mechanism of injury, whether it was ingestion or just an injury, where was the care received, and the date that the care was received. You can put any, notes. Again, we don't want case notes in here, but just anything to let your supervisor know. So you'll see that the quarter it happened in, so it's saying it happened in September, there was an injury. And so if there was no injury, let's say I didn't have this, you would hit verify no injury. And we ask that this is done quarterly too at the end of the quarter. So although rate card verifications happen within the quarter, verifying for no injury and no maltreatment should take place after the quarter, just because the statement is that I'm certifying that during this period, there was no injury. So if you do it during the quarter, you don't know if it happened after that. So this should always happen after the quarter. So I'm going to say, it can't be verified now because it's not the end of the quarter, but I'm saying for this quarter, to my knowledge, I certify that there's no injury or maltreatment. I would just put my signature and the date I'm signing for. It won't let me save because this quarter hasn't ended. And so if it had ended, I can hit submit and it will just say that I verified right here. Signature, it was certified by me and signed today that there was no injury. Same thing for maltreatment. You would report it here. Who was reported by, whether the school, daycare provider, anything like that. Date of the report outcome, whatever, if it was investigated, FARS, or unknown, and then you can save it. And the same thing for verifying no maltreatment. Again, I can't because it's not the end of the quarter, but the same way you would do so. So that is the last tab for the child. The status history, again, shows the experience of the child in home visiting. So were they exited? Did they re-enroll? Did they get transferred? Those kind of things. And this is where it would happen here.
So Ashley, if I could jump in, we do have a few questions that I think would be, maybe we should say out loud. One is, from Sue, can you talk about when the first piccolo is put in the system? And if the initial piccolo is entered too soon, will it reflect wrong for all of ECIS for this family? I'll say that so the piccolo, and first let me acknowledge that different model use different assessments. So this piccolo is used for PAT and Child First. And if you use the piccolo, it's, as you know, it's first valid, quote unquote, at 10 months. And I think your question is, if you put it in, say, when the child is 8 months old, there's no harm done. The system knows that the child's only 8 months old. So if you run a benchmark report, it's going to not count that child as having received that assessment, because it is smart enough to know, I'm looking for piccolo once that child turns 10 months old. So I hope that answers it. So if you entered it, it's sort of no harm, but nor will it count, right? So I hope that answered that one. And Ashley, you may, my apologies, you may have covered this. I had my head down in the chat for a few minutes when you were doing ASQs. The question was, how do we document that a child is already receiving birth to 3 services when we complete the ASQ? Did you show that in the?
I did not, but I can.
Okay.
So you would hit no. And am I right, Connie? You'd say layer.
Yeah, absolutely. And while you're doing that, I'll say that in terms of in terms of benchmarks, the benchmark only looks for selected ASQs. It's recommended that you do a lot of them over time, but the benchmark report per se is only looking for ASQs that are done at 9 months, 18 months, and then either 24 or 30 months. And so at those specific ASQs, it is important to do exactly what Ashley's doing, which is say, no, I didn't do the ASQ, and this is why, right? Because otherwise the report says, oh, baby's 9 months old, where's that ASQ? And you need to tell the system there is no ASQ because they're already in treatment. And this is exactly how you would do it. So for that 9 month, you click on the 9 month, as Ashley did, ASQ complete, no, and why not, delays already known. And if you do that, the system says, okay, I won't, sort of penalize you by putting you in the report saying it's missing, right? When I run the report, I'm going to exclude this child from that measure because I know why you didn't do the ASQ.
And it's important to note how they are excluded by only the first two, correct, Connie?
That's
Delay
absolutely
already
right.
known and child working with a specialist. So
Yep.
just because someone else already administered, like the daycare provider, that does not take them out of the measure. It's expected that you still, they won't take them out of the measure. It's still looking for you to do an ASQ.
Okay, and it says, but we are completing ASQ even if they're receiving birth to 3 services, ... You don't need to. It's confusing because there are some assessments that are required even if there's a known condition. But in the case of ASQs, if there is a delay, you don't need to. Oh, maybe you're saying you are. Maybe Maria is saying we are completing. That's fine. You absolutely can. The tricky thing to know, so if a child is in birth to 3 and you want to do an ASQ, you're absolutely can enter that. The tricky thing to know is that if you do, and if the child has a score and is indicating a possible delay, and you say there is a possible delay, it's going to look for a referral. So the tricky thing to know is you absolutely can enter the ASQ information, but know that if you say in the ASQ area that there's a delay, the report is going to say, I see a delay, where's the referral? And in that case, you do need to enter that a referral was given. And remember that working with a home visitor individually can count as a sort of approved referral. And I'll say also, I know this is really confusing. I think if I were hearing this for the first time, my head would be spinning. And we have a document, the screening and referral recommendations got to be really complicated. And so we wrote out a document called Screening and Referral Expectations, which is going to be one of the documents we cover tomorrow in the resource session. So I highly recommend, if you're glazing over right now and don't understand what the requirements are, because they differ for ASQs and IPV and depression, I highly, highly recommend this document. Sometimes I think you just have to sort of sit quietly with it for a minute and absorb it. Laura just put in the chat to clarify, if the child is in treatment, we do not need to do an ASQ. Yes, that is, Ashley, correct me if I'm wrong, because I still get mixed up about it. But yeah, my understanding is correct. You don't need to do an ASQ if the child's in treatment. The big but is if you do, and many home visitors do want to do the ASQ. So the but is if you do one, be aware that if you record that there is a delay, then you're on the hook for saying that you provided a referral. So that's the only caveat. I hope that was clear. ASQ that Monica had, I think Monica's all set. Monica, chime in if you're not about ASQs. And maybe while Monica's thinking, we also got a question, can you go into more detail about the maltreatment tracks? And I think what you mean there is the investigative, in other words, when there is a report, it asks what is the outcome of the report, and in the drop down, could be investigated, it could be support track only, or it's unknown. And Ashley, you probably know about the support track better than I do. If you want to maybe speak to what that is.
I do, kind of. So it's like, and with the whole Family First initiative that DCF has, the support track can kind of be like they'll refer you to one of their home visiting programs. It's not necessarily being investigated. Connie, do you want to talk about which one would get them into the benchmark?
Yeah. So it is the investigative track that puts you into the benchmark. And so like if you click that, the next question is, was it substantiated? Yes, no. And if so, what was the date substantiated? But to be clear, and this is kind of maybe more for some of the old folks, because rate card used to depend on whether it was substantiated or not. So to be clear that child maltreatment and referrals is not in rate card anymore. It is in the benchmarks. And as far as the benchmarks go, it's only whether it was investigated that the report looks at. So of course we want to know whether it was substantiated or not, but if you don't know yet, it's fine to just say, you know, that it's under investigation. We sort of have gotten what we need, and then when you find out what the resolution is, you can add that. Laura, did that answer it?
Yeah, I guess I wasn't sure if like, if let's say DCF comes out and then decides not to do anything, is that investigation or not? Like, just because they picked it up, is it an investigation, or does that mean it goes further than that? And then my other question is, do we enter if the report is made, but it's not about the primary caregiver, it's about a teacher or a parent they don't live with or something like that?
You would, I'll answer the second one first. You wouldn't, this is only against a caregiver, whether it doesn't necessarily have to be the primary, but it would be, we are only gathering this information if it's about, you know, a caregiver of the child who's enrolled in home visiting. Oh, I beg your pardon. That is, I forgot that was in there. So Laura, that answers your question. Thank you, Ashley. Okay, I was thinking that was who made the report. Okay, but it's there as well. So that answers the question. So we have enrolled or not enrolled. Disregard what I just said. And then here it is. Here's the list out. If it's not an enrolled caregiver, what the possibilities are. And then to your first question, if DCF comes out, I don't, again, either Ashley, I think Ashley McAuliffe's here too. I don't know if anyone in the home visiting team, if DCF comes out, from Laura saying, I'm not sure myself whether that counts as an investigation. Like, does that by definition mean that there was an investigation if DCF comes out? I'm not sure myself. And we can get back to you, or I don't know if there's anyone else on the home visiting team who wants to speak to that.
I would say no, because wouldn't they have to kind of see which track they would go in? And if they come out and say it's a FARS example, that's one thing. I would think investigative means that they obviously, you know, see something or believe something and they're taking it further. But that's my point of view.
I believe that's accurate, Ashley. One, it's fully being investigated, and the other, they're just going to provide services to support the family.
Mm-hmm. All right, are we good? Should I move on to exiting?
I think we are. I don't know if I think it was Monica. I said, oh, I hope that answered your question, and then I went right on to something else. So Monica, if you have any remaining ASQ questions, why don't you go ahead and put them in the chat or speak up. And otherwise, I think we're caught up.
Okay. So I will move forward and I'll go back to the caregivers page. You'll see here that I have Bella Brown, the caregiver. Under the summary tab and the actions menu, I am going to exit this caregiver. Well, first you could transfer. So has the caregiver signed a consent form to send their record? And that's one of our consent on the same consent form that they sign. There's also a bottom section that's for transferring. And so the current agency is here. I'm going to send it to, you can pick any agency you need to. Be mindful that there is, you know, there might be more than one agency that is, you know, maybe a different model or a different funding stream. So make sure you're sending it to the correct one. And so you would select that here, the transfer date. And then any notes that you need to, you know, maybe we talked on the phone, this is caregiver that I talked to you about yesterday or whatever it is. And then you would save that. I'm not going to save because I don't want this to really be transferred, but that's how you would do that. Also under the actions tab is where you would exit. Well, before I exit, I'll show you could change index child too. You can change the index child. So if there was another child enrolled, right now I only have one, but if there was a sibling enrolled, I could just, you know, unclick this one and click the other one to change index child. And then now we will move forward with as if I was exiting a child or exiting the caregiver, excuse me. So home visiting end date, this is the date they ended services with you, and you can always backdate. Gwen, I see your hand up. Do you want to ask a question now?
Yes, I just want to make sure, and it's going back to the question with the twins. Once I enter in the mother and the first child, and all I have to do is just go back to add a child and give that same information, and it will merge on with the mother and the first child.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to make sure that both twins are on. Okay.
Yep. As long as you're entering it through, I wanted to press cancel. If you're under the caregiver, it will assume that you want to joining with this caregiver. So I'm under Bella Brown and I want to add a twin, the other twin. I would just go to add child again.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And so if I did want to exit the caregiver, move forward with that, I would just, you know, select did they benefit? Was the reason? And so, you know, you can hit submit and this caregiver would end up in exited. So now you'll see here, I have 3 caregivers that are in exited and automatically brought me here. You can tell by the black line underneath the box. And here's Bella Brown. Once I'm here, I can always either re-enroll or revert. And I'll tell you the difference. But first I wanted to say, if you truly did exit them and then you forgot that you had information that was supposed to be entered before you exit them, you can always update an exited record. Okay, so if I had to add a screening, or maybe I can't, maybe you have to revert. Connie?
I'm sorry, Ashley, I was distracted for a moment.
That's okay. I thought you were able to and update information in an exited record.
Yes, so except you can't with referral.
Oh, maybe that's why it was. Okay.
Yeah, you should be able to in the other tabs.
Okay, so maybe I just clicked the wrong button. So I can always add something here and then say submit. Okay, so you don't have to revert them, which was the old purpose of revert. If you go back to your families, so I'm going to hit go back. So it brings me back to my exit. Well, brings you back to your enrolled caregivers. But Bella Brown's exited. So I can always update information, although they are exited. Revert is if you truly didn't mean to exit this person, it was an accident, you can revert them and it will bring them back to your enrolled caregivers. Or if they, you know, went away, you lost contact with them, or they exited, but then they had a second child, you know, 3 years later and they come back and they still need your support, you can always re-enroll them. And so you would go through here. If it's been less than 6 months since they exited, there's less information that you need to update. But if it's been more than 6 months, you're going to have to kind of update a lot more information. So did they sign consent again? So I think that question came up in the beginning. Do you need to get consent for them to re-enroll? Yes. The date they signed that consent. Are they prenatal? We'll say no. I do want to re-enroll the child that exited, but you can say that they're a sibling or the index, and then you hit re-enroll if you do want to. And then you collect that risk information again, okay? So I will just do some here. And then I would hit re-enroll. And this caregiver would then appear, I believe, on your pending intakes page. Yep. Bella Brown's here because you have to, you know, add the home visit again. This is where if it's been less than 6 months, a lot of this information is already populated and you can just override it and update it. If they, you know, are no longer at this address, you can change it here. but some of it will be blank because if it's been more than 6 months, we do want that information updated. But since it's only been a week since this caregiver is gone, a lot of it came over from my previous enrollment. You would also assign the home visitor to them and the first home visit that you had with them. And then they would be back re-enrolled. Anything that I'm missing, Connie, or questions?
There's a question about transfers in the chat, which is, can you discuss how a transfer works with the next agency that picks up? So in other words, the receiving agency, what needs to be updated? Does the enrollment reflect the original agency start date, and can it be updated? And absolutely, go to the, did you finish re-enrolling? No. Do you have an example of a re-enrolled caregiver? You don't, do you? Not an enrolled not in your enrolled group yet.
I can
Go to just any enrolled caregiver record if you could.
Go to any enrolled caregiver. Okay.
Yeah, because I just wanted to show that that when you click on the summary page, if it's a transfer or a re-enroll, it's going to have, see where it says enrollment date in the upper right there, just on the summary page here. In this case, it's 1/1/2019. There's a second field right next to it that'll say transfer date or re-enrollment date. I believe it's working already for re-enrolls, and I believe the transfers, the developers are still working on it. So if, after this call, if you go in and say, but my transfer is not showing, I think you're right. I think it's not there yet for transfers, but the developers are working on it. Like I said, I think it's there for re-enrolls, but the point is, it's going to show, and again, give us another couple of weeks to get those changes pushed through. But in a couple of weeks, say, you'll be able to see right on the summary page, if it was a transfer, you'll see the original, and I think it'll be labeled original enrollment date and then transfer date, and similarly for re-enrolls, original enrollment date and then re-enrollment date. The other way to see it is under status history. If you could click on that, it'll show there, and this is working immediately right now. If it's a transfer, you see how it says enrollment pending and enrolled, there would be a few more lines that said something like transfer pending and then transfer. So you can always, even as of today, you can always see transfers and re-enrolls in that status history table. We're cleaning it up a little bit. Sometimes it's a little bit developer speak right now, that status history, we're cleaning up the language, but you should be able to decipher, you can at least understand that it was a transfer or that it was a re-enroll in that status history tab. In terms of what information needs to be updated, it's really as if the original agency is handing you the record. Like imagine it being a full, like the old fashioned medical records, like everyone used to have a medical record in paper. Like it's almost as if you handed over that paper record, and then you said, okay, thank you. And then you have everything that the original agency had, and then you add to it. So you don't have to do anything as the receiving agency. You kind of have inherited this record. You have access to all of it. And then you just add to it. So you should be able to see all the prior home visits, all the prior assessments, and then you just say, okay, you pick it up, you enroll them, as Ashley was showing, you do those steps where you assign the home visitor, you put in the first home visit date, in other words, the first home visit date that you had them. The caregiver moves from pending into enrolled, and from there, it's just a record like any other record that you would just sort of continuously add to, just like you would anyone else. So I hope that answered the transfer question. There's also a question from Helma at the beginning. You mentioned that under the agency name, we may have our subcontractor listed.
So we'll have to do that on the back end. If you have a subcontractor that's not under your, tab here, we'll have to set that up for you so you can see that info.
Helma, was that your question?
So send an email to your liaison, Helma.
Okay, good. Thank you. She responded. Great. Okay, Ash, I think we're caught up. Oh, wait. What happens if the referral is not completed? 100% of that is missing important information. There is certain required information on the referral and certain information that's not required. if you don't have all the required information entered, it won't save it. So we recommend that you have, everything, all the ones with the little red stars are required. And, like when Ashley couldn't save something, she said, oh, what did I miss? What we're looking for those little red stars, like, oh, I must have missed something that was required. So it literally won't let you save it unless you have entered all the required information. There is some information that's not required, like right on this view, you can see home phone is not required. I think the disposition, whether the caregiver accepted home visit or not, is not required. So you can save this if you scroll down a little bit, Ashley. Even if it's incomplete, you could say, this one happens to be complete, but you could say save, save, finish later. If something that's not that, I think that's required, so it won't let you do it. Yeah. But the point is, you can, as long as as long as you've entered the required information, you can save it and finish later.
Mm-hmm. Okay, if you have other questions, feel free to put them in the chat, but I know we have 5 minutes left and I want to go into reports just quick.
While you're opening reports, the question is, how can an outreach worker open or receive transfer? An outreach worker can't receive a transfer. An outreach worker can only initiate referrals and pass them on. It's only supervisors who can receive a transfer. I was referring to other agencies. Nope, different person. I was referring to other agencies that send the referral. Okay. So the outreach person is happy with that answer. But D-Water says I was referring to other agencies. So if another agency sends a referral, it goes to the pending intakes bucket of the supervisor.
Okay, so you'll see a number of reports up here. You can only see, I believe, the top 4. You don't see rate card because that is not ready for you to view yet. This is old rate card reports for us. So I'm going to just show you and explain the summary report. This is, I think, Connie's favorite report, she says, because it just kind of gives you at a point in time, let's say I wanted to do since April 1st to today, how many people have enrolled, how many people have I served. I'm just going to do my agency. You only have access to pull your agency. And so I'm going to do a home visiting program. You can pull your subs too if you're a lead contractor and all home visitors. Export to PDF means that a PDF is going to pop up. It's usually quicker than view in browser, correct, Connie? Or is it vice versa?
No, it is. The PDF is faster.
So I just did view in browser because you can, hyperlink. These numbers are hyperlinked so you can kind of see who it is. So the person that newly enrolled during this time period was Happy Monday. And so it kind of gives you, newly enrolled during this period, number served during this period, number that have exited during this period, how many were enrolled as of today. So 0 pregnant women are enrolled, female caregivers and so forth. These are going to be changing, right, Connie?
Yeah, what those rows, this is a good example you did because it's showing, I think, all the rows. If you had no pregnant women ever, that row wouldn't even appear. Like it's not like pregnant women always appears with zeros. So the table might look have more or fewer rows. Only if you don't have anyone that applies, it's not going to show that row.
And then female and male we're changing, correct? Or is it just going to be the third one?
Yeah, that's a good point. Ashley's referring to as of October 1st, we're collecting non-binary as a third choice for gender. So yes, this will have to be revised.
Okay, and then the last column here shows number of home visits during this period. So if your director wants to know how many visits were completed for a certain time period or how many people you served during a time period, this is a great report to run for them. Okay.
And Anya's asking, Ash, is this information useful for the quarterly report?
Probably. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure what exactly is on the revised quarterly report compared to this, but definitely could crosswalk them and see. So I know I have 1 minute left and I just want to go into the other 2 reports. So benchmark time is upon us. You have till September 30th to kind of update information on existing caregivers or caregivers that enrolled before September 30th. The demographic report, you run it the same way. Select the time period you're looking for. The benchmark year is October 1st of any year to September 30th. So the current one would be October 1st, 2020 to September 30th, 2021. And you would fill all this information out, pull PDF, and it would have all your demographic information. I'm just going to do a quick one here, just to show you what it looks like. It's teachers, my model. And I'll export it. You should not be seeing social worker, correct, Connie? That's just our view.
Correct.
Okay. So it probably won't have much data in here because I only pulled 2 weeks, but it would eventually pull up a demographic report that includes, how the ages of the people enrolled, the ages of the children that were enrolled, the household income, number of home visits for that period, everything like that, race, ethnicity. And so you'll see here, nice little table of everything that we collect in the system for demographics, marital status, educational attainment, poverty, those kind of things. And I know we're 1 minute over. I just have one more report to pull for you, and that is the benchmark report. That is Form 2 benchmark, and you would run it the same kind of way. You would have the all the 19 measures, which we'll go over tomorrow, October 1st, 2020 to today. This is probably easier for you guys since you don't have all these options. It wouldn't be, it automatically default to what you have, and then export to PDF. And so this is your benchmark report, which you will be submitting to your program liaison by October 15th. Any questions while this is running? On anything, not necessarily reports, but anything from the system.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just at the beginning when you said when you would like most referrals in the system, I mean the ones who don't give consent, they become anonymous. But then you added something new to me when you say, oh, maybe you can add little information. Maybe she wants to, you will say, okay, you can use my name, your last name, but she has refused home visiting. She doesn't want the service. Do they have to sign a consent for me to enter little information?
They do, Carmen. Yeah, go ahead, Ashley. You can.
I was just saying we do have the screening consent form that I believe that was attached with all the contracts that have been sent out, but we can also send out if they haven't already, but from your program liaison. And I think, is that part of the resources we'll go over tomorrow, Connie?
Yes.
So tomorrow during our resource session, we have the screening consent form, and that is if they do give consent to enter minimal information, even though they don't want home visiting, that's what they would sign.
Oh, they have to sign something. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but that's only if you put their name in the system. You can enter it anonymously as well, which they wouldn't have to sign for.
Yep.
Yeah, we have been doing that. Like I just click no, and then they will become anonymous. But now you mentioned something about maybe the caregiver allows you to enter little information, and that's when I got confused. Because for me, it was yes or no. It wasn't like it's something in the middle.
Yeah, so if they are okay with you entering minimal information, such as where they live and their name in the system, get that consent from them, even if they don't want home visiting service. You can say down here that you offered them and they declined, and then the reason why they declined. So yeah.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Yep. And so here's the benchmark report form that I pulled. It goes through the 19 measures and includes the numerator and denominator. It's helpful to know that home visitors have access to these reports for their own caseload. So if you are a home visitor at any time, you can run a benchmark report and see how you are faring on benchmarks for your families. And that way you can kind of, figure out, like, I knew I had 4 births and I know that only, 0 were preterm. I think something's wrong or whatever with that. Let me go into the file and check on that. Or I did screen this person, or I did give that tobacco referral. Why is it saying I didn't? So home visitors can run these reports too. So numerators and denominators are tomorrow's fun, but that's all for ECIS. I want to be respectful of people's time. Again, we will have more information tomorrow during the benchmark session and our resource and documents session.
And Ashley, I'm just grabbing the screen to share that we also are going to have office hours coming up. Oops, oh, darn it, I shouldn't have done that. Sorry about that. Let's keep it like this. The office hours, we thought that, a lot of this really is hairy, especially if you're new to the system. And so we have set up some office hours where Ashley and I will just, and program liaisons, we'll just not counting all program liaisons, but we'll sort of spread it out. But folks will be available to just literally just drop in, ask questions, stay if you want, don't stay if you want. So this is really just to talk through some of these, more complicated issues or simple issues if you have just simple questions. And this is part of the slideshow, and I'm sure we'll be sending out an email with these dates and times as well.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to your program liaison. And we'll see you this afternoon for our doula session.
Thank you very much, everyone.